Friday the 4th of May I went to Carroll Row Farm and fished on fall with the Waggler. And this is the video of that day. Right, fished a match here at the weekend and had a few fish down the edge. Had 3 carp, 2 tench down the edge. But in the middle of the match it was slow, so I tried I had a chuck on the Waggler to see what was out there, and it was absolutely full of fish, and I right enjoyed myself. And I had just under, I think I had 14 pound 4 of roach, and I had 1 bream on the Waggler, and it was really hectic sport. So basically I've come back to see if I can improve on, because I was a bit rusty on Sunday. At times I didn't get the feeding right. Bait wise I only had maggot with me, which is all I've got with me today. I mean, realistically for a match I probably would have been better off with castor, possibly hemp as well. That might have sorted out some of the better fish, because there's some nice roach and rudd in here, but there's also a huge head of small fish, and on a warm day like today it's difficult to get through them, but possibly with castor or hemp I might do better. Anyway, the idea of today was just to come back and try a few things, and I noticed on the day that actually if you hit the same spot all the time you ended up getting small fish. I think the fish got wise to you, and the same with the depth. If you sort of fish the same depth for too long, then again you ended up getting smaller fish. And what I really wanted was to catch like that one. That was a nice little rudd, about 4 ounces, and that's when you're fishing a match, that's obviously a really good sort of make weight fish. So what I try and do in the warmer weather is feed an area rather than be too accurate, and then cast around the edge of that area. If I can do that, sometimes you find the better fish have just backed off the feed a little bit. And so if you cast round the edge where your feed's gone in, and sometimes you get a bigger fish. And there seems to be definitely 2 times that you get bites. You either get a bite instantly, or you've got to wait for it to settle, like that. That time I had to wait until it settled. That's about a 3 ounce roach. The other thing I sort of wanted to try and explain is when I'm winding a fish in, I'm trying to wind in at a speed that the fish can swim at, and then when you come to lift them out and to hand, hopefully they just lay there still, so you can quickly get hold of them and unhook them in the net and out again for another fish. So I'm not trying to skull drag them in, I'm just trying to wind in gently and hopefully they just swim towards me, and then at the time when I get to the right length I swing them to hand and they just hang there. Today I'm pleasure fishing, so I'm not using a net, so I will never know what weight I could have got. And then the other thing I do is I swap the sequence around of feeding and casting. Sometimes I'll cast in first and then feed, sometimes I feed and then cast. I'll just wait for the plane to go over. Ooh, what's this? In the match, I had a nice bream. This doesn't know it's hooked. That's a bit sad. One thing I didn't explain, in the warm weather, you quite often find that fish dear oh dear, that fish are in the warm wear. Did it come off then? Yes, it did. Oh dear. And in fact, I've got a scale on the hook, which accounts for a lot. Right, sorry, back to what I was trying to explain. It's all about finding the depth the fish are feeding at. At this time of year, the fish tend to be close to the surface. So in an ideal world, if you fish 6 inches deep or 12 inches deep, you catch them. But in actual fact, if you do that, what you'll find is that, well, a couple of things. One is you probably end up in loads of tangles, but the other thing is you'll miss loads of bites. So the alternative is to fish slightly deeper, sort of 2'6", 3 foot, with virtually no lead on the line. So it's very slow sink, and that gives the fish just long enough to hang themselves. And the bites you get can be anything from float just moving sideways to not settling properly to pulling under, but there's a whole variety of bites. But as you can see, when I'm feeding, the fish are boiling on the surface at the moment, and they're hitting the bait almost instantly. And obviously today I see another nice rudd, about 3 ounces. In a match, I mean, it would be absolutely fantastic. Catching 3-4 ounce fish every cast. So this time I'm going to feed. I'm going to try casting to the left, where the feed edge was. Oh, instant bite. And a roach this time. lines. Similar, this time cast to the right hand side of where the feed went in. To wait this time for a while. Oh, yeah, it's difficult. It wouldn't surprise me if there's a fish on actually. No, it just went then as I struck. See, that is one of the slight disadvantages of fishing. When I say deep, because I'm fishing slow sink, I'm fishing shallow really, but I'm just giving the fish a long enough line so they don't feel the float straight away, and it gives them a bit more confidence. Ah, look at that. I'm just about to feed. When I was here on Sunday, I was catching mostly roach, whereas today it's mostly rudd. Fishing single maggot, 20 hook. The hook length I think is it's either 0.1 or 0.09. If bite slowed down, I'd go down to a finer hook length. But because I'm swinging to hand and catching fast, and I'm getting bites quickly, then fishing sort of the 0.1 or 0.09 hook length gives me that bit of security. As I say, the trick is just to wind in at a speed the fish can swim at, and then swing them to hand. The fish hopefully just hang there, because they're not spooked, they're not frightened. You don't have to do a juggling act. You can looks like someone up there's got one in the net. I was distracted then, so I suspect that bite had been there for quite a while. Anyway, press on regardless. Just tried it, as you can see, I've tried a couple of casts without feeding. Oops. I must admit, I love this sort of fishing. When it's as easy as this, it can get monotonous, I have to say. I'd much prefer it to be just slightly harder, so you feel as though every change you make makes a difference. It's a nice slow bite. Oops. At the moment I haven't had to sort of do anything really to try and speed up the catch rate, but sometimes cutting back on the feed, so they're just putting in 4 to 6, sort of starves them into submission, And sometimes when you're getting pestered by lots of little fish, then putting in sort of big pouches less frequently can effectively give the bigger fish a chance to get to the bait and hopefully feed the little ones off. Oh, bumped it. Naughty. That's my fault. I wasn't concentrating and the rod was loose in my hand, so although I got a leaf. Put a fresh maggot on, that one's all chewed. Look at that, it's not even settling, it floats out of the water all the time. I suspect that was a little, for a bit of nothing that time. Whoa. As you can see, when I'm winding in, I keep the rod low as well, which again, all hopefully is designed at getting the fish to come in quietly, so I can quickly unhook them and out again. Today, the fish are marking the maggots. Or, you know, if they weren't marking the maggots too much, and I'm getting bites as quick as this, I'd be tempted to use the same maggot for 2 or 3 casts. Look at the size of that. Not exactly a monster, but one day it will be. That's a nice little roach. I have to say, this lake is absolutely full. Whether I could catch more on the whip is an interesting question. But fishing the Waggler, when you're getting bites this fast, I think is faster than the pole. Unless you're fishing the whip or down the edge. But if I was shipping the pole in and out, I wouldn't be able to compete with the speed of bites that I'm getting at the moment. As you can see, I'm getting, ooh, that came in too quick, and it was, fortunately, it's still, see that time, it didn't mark the bait, so I'm going to be, and the fish don't seem to mind it either, which is, as you can imagine, nearly all the fish are lip hooked, and I don't need to use a disgorger, but sometimes if they get caught in the corner of the mouth, even though you're fishing a barbless hook, it can be a bit awkward to get the bait out, the hook out, and so using a disgorger quite often is the easiest thing. Get a small one this time again. Yes, there seems to be more roach now than it started off, it was nearly all rudd. it's becoming more and more. Today I'm going to fish the Waggler, very basic setup, 13-foot rod. The float is it's a 2.5 AA Waggler. As I was saying earlier, the way I fish it is a slow sink, and so I've got, I think that's a 0.1 hook length, size 20 hook. I've got one number 8 shot about halfway, not quite, but nearly halfway depth. I've got another couple of number 8s up here, and basically the float's held on with some float stops. The idea of the float stops, on this one I haven't done it actually, but normally I have 4 float stops, and the idea, the middle 2 are actually what are holding the float at the depth, and the other 2 I use as markers, so if I plumb up and get the depth, then I leave one of those float stops at depth, so I can always go back and fish the actual depth of the water if I want. But basically what I do is I just sort of cast around and try different depths until I find the depth that the better fish are at. Usually, in colder weather it can be a bit deeper, you know, it can be 4.5 foot. I mean, I don't know how deep it is here, but just for the sake of argument we'll say it's 6 foot deep here, and at the moment, because it's still spring, I've started probably at about 3.5 foot. So I'm fishing single maggot, sometimes double maggot can be a better bait, but I find single maggot catches you everything, and most days. Right, so far today I haven't had to change depths or anything. There's been so many fish in front of me. All I've had to do is feed and cast, wait a few seconds, and there's a fish on. Rudder back. Bless them. All they had in the shop today was mixed maggots, which actually is 99% red with a few yellows and fluoros mixed in, so that's not too bad. I don't like to confuse the fish too much, although it's nice to have a few different coloured ones for the hook, but I like to feed the same thing all the time. As I've said before, my idea when I'm fishing shallow like this actually is to fish an area rather than fish a tight place and then cast around the edges of it. Now that probably won't come out in this video because I've had to fix the positions of the cameras while I'm fishing, and so I'm having to cast much tighter than I normally would, just to make sure that everything is in the camera shot. And as I was saying about, see that one float moved sideways, then it sort of bobbed and moved sideways. You see that brought that in too quick and it was just flashing about a bit. Fortunately it's settled down in my hand, so no dramas trying to unhook it. Try and do everything smoothly, so I try and just sort of cast nice and gently, trying to sort of feather it down so it doesn't make too big a splash when it hits the water. And there does seem to be two different times when I get bites. So I can get bites as soon as it hits as soon as the bait hits the water. They quite often are rudd. If it settles for 4 or 5 seconds and then goes, it's more likely to be a roach. And as I say, I'm trying to keep the fish guessing, so I change the feed rates. Just went sideways. And that was a little rudd. This, in terms of tactics, this is the sort of thing that I do in the middle of a match when bites are hard to come by, because quite often you can get bonus fish in the first hour or so, hour and a half of a match, and then it can go a bit iffy, and then the last hour, sometimes down the margins, the fish suddenly start to wake up and start feeding, and so what you've got to do is basically sort of, and what I did the other day, I sort of split the match up into 3 sections. The first hour and a half was in the margins for bonus fish. Once that sort of slowed down, and I felt I was going to struggle to get any more, I fed the Waggler line. I fed the Waggler line for a good 10 minutes or so before I actually cast the float out. And on the day, I was the only person on the lake fishing the Waggler, so I had the middle of the lake all to myself. So it's a bit like pleasure fishing, a bit like today really. And in that middle spell of the match, as I say, I had a bream that wasn't about 3 pound, and I had 14 pound of roach, so I had 17 pound of fish in that middle section of the match. And I had basically 2 carp and 2 tench in the middle of the match, but I actually made a mess of things because I actually got broke twice in that initial session, and my fault. Again, I hadn't prepared for the match properly, and so the rigs and everything were all wrong, and I was fishing too light. And then I had 1 little carp in the last spell. But I did enjoy myself in that mid-spell. Sort of getting bites as regular as this. As I say, if you did it for the whole match, I probably would have had a similar weight to what I had in total. But it does, when you're getting bites this frequently, you're not really having to work things out, then it does get a bit monotonous. And so just doing it as a change in the middle of the match is quite a good idea. It doesn't always work, but if it does work, as you can see, you get bites pretty quickly, almost. Well, as I say, there's two in this sort of weather. You can sometimes get a bite as soon as your bait hits the surface, and if you don't get a bite straight away, then once it's settled for 3 or 4 seconds, try and keep everything smooth. Try not to strike as hard as I just did then. Try and just do a nice smooth action. Try and not spook the fish. One way to do that is to wind in at the speed that they can swim at. Straight away, I didn't even have time to pick up my catapult. Ah dear. I honestly don't know how they get to it so fast. Ah, nothing there. Missed it. Lift bite. The rudder certainly moved back in. Yay, look at that. Only catching 2 to 3 ounce roach and rudd within seconds. Goodness knows what that would add up to in terms of the total weight. Right.